The humble gradient doesn't sound like a particularly interesting effect or tool when it comes to your toolkit for building websites, but with a little bit of ingenuity and creativity, you can use it in a lot of really cool ways. In this video, I'm going to give you 3 completely different ways in which you can use this to enhance your designs. So let's crack on with the first one. So if we take a look at this example, you can see I've got my hero section with my background image and my kind of product and all those kinds of things. And then there's this harsh cutoff between the two elements. So we've got this what I offer services section. Let's deal with that first of all and see how we can combine a background image alongside a gradient to make this look a little bit more polished. So if we hop into Bricks Builder, which is what I'm going to use for this particular example, but again, you can do this inside tools like Elementor, you could do this with plain CSS, those kinds of methods. I'm just choosing to use bricks. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this hero section. And if we take a look on the left-hand side, you can see I've already got this background image inserted. So we can't use the background element. We need to use a different way of working. So we're going to come into the gradient overlay section. We're going to change this from apply into the background and set this to be an overlay. So this is going to sit on top of our background. So it allows us to stack these things together. So now what we can do is we can add some colors in. So let's go and add the color that we've got underneath, this sort of dark blue. Add our color. I'll select this from my color palette. There's my color, and you can see this now blends in together, but this is now overlaid completely. So what we need to do is simply duplicate this. So we'll make sure we've got our first color selected. We'll choose our color chip. And from there, we're going to adjust the transparency so there's nothing there at all. We're going to completely get rid of any color. And now you can see what this does is it creates a transition from the top through to the bottom and therefore blends that in with the background of the section down below. So if we save this and preview, you'll see now we get this transition that melts into the second section. So a really simple way of working. But the most important thing here is that we stack that overlay on top of the background element to allow us to work in this particular fashion. So a really simple example, but it can be used in a lot of creative ways. Now next up, we're going to take a look at how we can use a gradient background to do something else. So we take a look at this example. You can see we've got this white section at the top. We've got this kind of reddish color underneath and the image overlays over the top of the two of them. Now, traditionally, you would probably think that we're using some kind of negative margin to push this image up to a section above it, but we're not. We're using a gradient. So if you've ever wondered how this works, it's actually easier than you may think. So again, coming back into Bricks Builder, we're going to come down to the section that we want, which is our CTA section. We'll select this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come over into our gradient overlay again. Background is fine for this example. We're going to do the same thing again. We're going to add 2 colors in. So first of all, we'll set the color we want, which is going to be the sort of salmony reddish color. We're going to duplicate that first color. Select our first one and set this to be, in this example, white. But you could just set this to transparency if you want to. It's up to you. We're going to set this to be white. So now you can see we've got a traditional looking gradient which goes from the white at the top through to this kind of reddish color underneath. But what we can also do is we can set a color stop inside here. So if we set this to be 50, and we do exactly the same for the second one, set that to be 50. What this gives us now is a hard line stop. So if we, again, take a look at this in a preview window, we get that hard line transition that we're talking about. Now, obviously, this is in the wrong position. We want it to be adjusted. But what you need to do is adjust the values. The 50-50, you may need to set it to 40. It's up to you to test this out, depending upon the size of the image and so on. But you can use those stop positions to adjust not only the kind of cutoff point you can see here, but you can use this to position the actual gradient effect if you want to keep a traditional gradient effect going from one color through to another, or multiple colors. It's up to you. You can stack more than just 2. Now, speaking of more complex and comprehensive colors, we can also use what are called mesh gradients. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is a great example of a mesh gradient. This has multiple different colors in various different parts, and they meld into each other. They kind of blur off, and they kind of create this pretty cool looking effect. This is a free tool called Mesher. I'll link this in the description down below. Really cool way of being able to create your own mesh gradients and then use them. So let me show you how this works. We've got these little points that are the different colors. So you can see we can position these as we want, and as we move them around, you can see the effect, how they interact with the other colors or shades, and as they kind of roll off and create this gradient effect, which is pretty cool. And if you want to open up the settings for this, simply come out of this little color palette, click on it, and that'll open up the options. So you can see inside here, we can set the background color, any of the colors we want that are each of these little color chips. So we can adjust any of these. We can add additional colors in if we want to. Let's set this to be something really obvious like green. And you can see that adds it into the design, and then we can move this around and get this in interact with the various different elements in our design. So you can see we now adjust that. You can open this up. You can adjust the spread, the XY position, the blend that's being used. There's lots of different options. I recommend having a play around with this because you can get some really quite cool effects. So once you finish setting things up inside there's some more options we've got to play around with. We can also set this to be an animated effect. So at the moment, this is pretty cool. But we can also set this to be animated. So we'll select the animated option, click generate. We now get this animation effect in conjunction with the overall mesh gradient in the background. Again, we've got the same options. We can click to open this up. We now have some additional things inside here. So we can adjust the duration, the direction. So if you want to make this faster, you can set this to a shorter duration, and you see everything moves around a lot quicker. You want something a bit more subtle, well, you can increase this to lots of different values, say 25 seconds. Things now move a lot slower. So pretty cool. Again, you can add in any color, set the background color, all those kinds of cool things. So for our example, let's keep this super simple, and we'll just set a static background. To do that, we just uncheck animated, click generate, we have a new option. And you can keep on clicking generate until you get a different variation. And again, like I say, you can adjust all the colors and everything inside here. We'll say we're happy with this. We'll click on export, and now we could export this as a animated SVG, a static SVG, but the better way of doing it in most use cases is going to be to grab the CSS that allows you to create this. We've got two variations here. We've got the minified CSS and the normal CSS, all the spacing and so on. Grab whichever you think is the best for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this. So jumping back into Bricks, all we need to do now is add this into the relevant section or element that we want to use. For this, we're going to use this portfolio section, and we're going to come over to the CSS, making sure I've got the class selected for this. We're going to pop in the root selector, which kind of targets just that individual section. And then we're going to paste in our little block of code. We need to remove a couple of things here, though. You can see it says your CSS selector here and an open curly bracket. We don't need that. We're going to remove that from there, and we're going to scroll down, and we're going to remove the last but one curly bracket. And you see now that's applied the effect to the background. We'll hit save draft on there, and we'll take a look at this. And you can see there's our mesh gradient background in all of its glory. Looks particularly ugly in this design, but you get the idea. So if you're an Elementor user, the technique is fundamentally the same. There's just a slight difference in how we implement it. Now, first of all, you do have to have Elementor Pro to be able to do this, because otherwise, if you come into advanced, you won't have the custom CSS option. So providing you do, we're going to use the container, which I've added in, which is just a placeholder container. And we're going to just paste in that little block of code that we copied from Mesher. You can see we've got the CSS selector. Let's get rid of that, including the period or the full stop if you're in the UK. And we're going to put in selector instead of root. And you can see that now immediately adds in that gradient mesh effect into our container. Pretty simple, pretty easy to do. Like I say, the only real difference between the two is that we have to use selector inside Elementor Pro, because that's the same kind of thing as using root. It targets this specific element. Once you've done that, job done, you can hit publish or save, whatever you want to do, and you now have that gradient mesh effect applied to this particular container. So that's 3 ways in which you can easily use gradients to create more cohesive designs. But if you want to learn more about using various different CSS effects and so on, check out this video next. It's a pretty cool one, and I think you'll like what you can do there. As always, all applicable links are in the description. My name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.